Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Data Leaders Unscripted, where we dive into conversation shaping the future of data, analytics, and AI. I'm your host, Marvin Mayorga, co founder at Data Meaning, and today we're focusing on how businesses and professionals can prepare for AI, artificial intelligence, and build a future ready workforce. Joining me today is Dave Collins, a strategic technology executive with deep experience in the retail and QSR space, quick service restaurant industries. Dave has led IT data warehousing integrations and analytics initiatives for enterprises such as CKE, Hardee's and Carl's Jr.'s, Tractor Supply, and he's currently at Zaxby's implementing a master data management solution and assisting with their data warehousing strategy. Dave, it's great to have you here.
Well, thanks, Marvin. It's great to be here. So thank you for having me.
Dave, let's go ahead and just jump right in. Let's start with your personal journey. You've worked across various industries, various organizations, and have an impressive career in tech and analytics. Can you share with the audience a little bit more about how you got started and maybe what key moments helped shape your path in becoming a leader in this space?
Sure. I think, my experience has been, in the retail space for IT. And I kind of got to start a little bit, maybe not the most normal start to this path. I graduated with a degree in marketing, and my start was out, doing direct sales. So I got a degree in marketing. I was doing direct sales. I was selling Canon copiers, back in the '90s. Okay, way back then. And I really did not enjoy that, but I got a lot of great first-hand experience with customers, and really understood the customer journey. But my passion really had been in technology. And so I went back to school. I went to a 2-year college and got an associate of applied science degree in computer programming. And with that, then I really loved computers. And so I was fortunate then, after being at some small companies in Iowa where I grew up, was doing telecom, where I founded, basically started. I went out to Denver, relocated to the Denver area, and started working for Gart Sports, which was a very large regional sporting goods company, which later became Sports Authority. And we're a direct competitor to Dick's Sporting Goods nowadays. Now, Sports Authority no longer exists. However, that's where I got my start, and that was really with retail, and getting firsthand experience really in the data space in retail. And my exposure with retail really, I grew up with retail. My dad owned a hardware store, and so I worked in the hardware store. So I actually understood all those aspects of retail, from bringing in inventory, putting it away on the shelves, doing all of that just all the stuff you do in retail. Whether it was a hardware store, but the same applies to any kind of retail business. And additionally, actually, when I was in high school, I was working at a Hardee's, in the back room, which kind of introduced me to the fast food industry. Okay. Which later, 30 years later, I go back, I end up working at that company, which was very funny, but provided a great experience for me when I got into the back end IT side of the house. So now when I got into Gart Sports, I was really given the opportunity, coming in as a entry level computer programmer, basically, and they had some projects to set up what was called author allocations and planning systems. So basically, your allocations and planning systems you have at any large retailer. Okay, they needed some help working with the vendor and installing that solution, and really adapting it and working with the vendor to get it set up. And so that's how I got my kind of first start into the data space and working with really the merchandising area. We got into some BI reporting and things like that. And during that time, I had some really good mentors with me, which really I think helps anybody in their career, is having a mentor, somebody that gives you a chance, that kind of sees, believes in you. And I think that's where I had Rob Glebe was a person that I worked for back at the time, and he really believed in me, and I did learn a lot from him. He went up later to work for Amazon and things like that in his career, but that's kind of how I got my start working there. And then after working there 5 years or so, I ended up getting married out there. Met my wife out in Denver, and she was from Florida, and I ended up taking an opportunity for Talbot's retail company. So Talbot's Clothing is a women's fashion retailer for the women that are in their 40s plus. Typically, is their target market place. Yeah, and so basically, I ran their data warehousing system, integration system, and I did that because at Sports Authority, I was doing the same thing. After I stood up those applications, I ran their BI team, stood all that up, and this was all back on Oracle technologies at the time. And basically had and I had gotten promoted to be a manager and took kind of the similar role down in Talbots. And so down there, um, again, very different product market, right? You have women's clothing versus, sporting goods. However, the back end on the IT side, very similar. Whether you're selling clothing or basketballs, you're selling merchandise, you're doing the same tech things. You're using planning, using BI tools, you're doing data integration, um, data warehousing. You have SKUs, all of that stuff that kind of ties into products and data. It's all the same regardless of really what you're selling behind the scenes. And there, I really enjoyed learning about, women's clothing and taking the challenge of having three separate data warehouses and different BI tools. We have MicroStrategy, we had Power BI, we had Oracle backend. So we ended up, I led the effort to combine everything onto a SQL Server platform at the time with Microsoft. And a lot of things, decisions were made to migrate to one platform. And so over the years, I worked to migrate three separate warehouses onto one enterprise warehouse. We stood that up on Power BI, used, integration tools or all the Microsoft stack to get that up and going, as well as I, ran some other applications at the time. And,
I think those are some really great projects to have under your belt for many people that are going through that in an organization where they're transitioning from one data warehouse to another or one BI platform to another. I know that those projects can, at the time, seem a little bit exhausting, but from a career perspective, it's definitely one of those things that you definitely want to have under your belt. By the way, I'm not sure if you heard, Dave, but MicroStrategy is no longer called MicroStrategy. Now they're called Strategy. Of course, aligning themselves with their Bitcoin strategy and becoming a Bitcoin reserve. But anyways, just plain fun fact that it's on the
I know
news.
they kept buying Bitcoin, in the last decade or more. Yeah, they just kept buying Bitcoin with all their revenues. That's funny. So
So sorry, I interjected, but yeah. So you did those migrations, those three migrations there.
yeah, going through and leading migrations of data platforms, or massive engagements that gave me the opportunity to not understand number one, understand the business, but really how to migrate one system to another and all the steps required to do that. Now that was a multi-year effort. Um, Additionally, then Talbots ended up buying J. Jill, which is another fashion retailer. Okay. Yeah. If you walk around any mall, you're going to see a Talbots or a J. Jill in there. And so we bought that and they didn't have a data warehouse. So we built an entire data warehouse for them. And then 3 years later, they ended up picking off J. Jill. And the only thing they took with them when they spun off was the data warehouse that I built. So out of all the systems that we integrated, the only thing that J. Jill wanted was the warehouse, which was awesome, because it was really a core to their being. And they built that, and then expanded it over the last decade. So, I was really proud of that work there while I was down there, getting involved in the retail side of the house. And then I ended up working at Tractor Supply, which is up here in Nashville, Tennessee, where I'm currently located. And, Tractor Supply, if you haven't heard of it out there, it's a rural lifestyle company that, works with, it's kind of like a hardware store with a pet store and, in a rural setting. Okay. If you think about that, if you're not familiar with that, if you live in a big city, you probably never heard of Tractor Supply because they're really in the rural markets, but they're really a nationwide leader in this space. And it was
Dave, I think I also heard that they sell crickets and chickens as well.
they do. Yes, yes. Every year they have chickens, live chickens that they bring into the store. Okay. And it's really quite something. And so, and this is for people that have really small hobby farms. Okay. Like you're at a small little farm and, you want to bring in, chickens every year. So you can go to Tractor Supply and pick up your chickens and then your feed and things like that. It's all right there for you, as well as you can, get some dog collars for your pets or your pet food. It's all right there. So it's really a unique business, but it's been very successful. And while I was there, I helped to stand up their loyalty platform, which is called Neighbors Club right now. So it's called the Neighbors Club platform, and I think they have over 35 million members on it right now. So it's really been very successful, and that's where I really dove into customer marketing, and I stood up their IT team that supported that solution there at Tractor Supply. And that was great. Again, core retail, but on the marketing side of the house. So really, learning about campaigns, direct marketing, one-to-one marketing, taking advantage of using that data that you have on a customer to help provide them, targeted offers and things like that. As nowadays we all get, on our phones, offers sent to us, whether email or other thing or via the apps, all of that stuff. And I know, Tractor Supply is really, trying to break ground using a lot of AI now, to help target customers and really provide them offers that resonate with them. Not everybody wants chickens, they might want dog food or something like that, right? You know, you know,
Or a cow feeder, actually, they sell that as well.
yeah, exactly. It's amazing. Then you have these little zero turn mowers out there too. You want to go, you need a giant zero turn mower. They sell those. Those are out in the front lots too. So, yeah, exactly. And so from
I heard
there,
reports of the Roombas, but in the mower space. Not sure if they have those yet, but I think that would be kinda nice. A little automated mower that would just kinda mow itself.
I mean, have you seen those? They have those out on lawns. I saw those when I was in Florida, going around to, they were pretty well. I've seen them out there, I mean, it's kind of funny, but as long as there's nothing in their way, you kind of see them mowing the grass. you know, it's a beat having someone mow your lawn or doing it yourself, but um, yeah, that was really for small lawns. I don't think if you have an acre, that's gonna really work to have one of those things out there for you. So, but anyway, so from there, I went over and I got a job at CKE, and that is the Hardee's and Carl's Jr. company that owns both of those organizations, and that's a franchisee organization. It's an international organization. They have around 3,500 stores, 2,800 domestic. The rest are all international. And so there, I started in really project management, and then quickly got into being their director over their data warehousing team, IT team, their ERP systems. And it was really kind of fun to come back to an organization that when I was a high school kid, I had worked. And, what was funny is that, making hamburgers really hasn't changed in 30 years. I mean, there are a lot of different automations out there, but they have robots now to make French fries and things like that in the industry. But the IT space obviously has changed. It's much more efficient, much faster. But the back end, the core concepts of serving your customer, providing hot food, good customer service, that has it. That's not going to change. I don't care what like fast food restaurant or restaurant you're in, what other technology you need. You still need the core concepts of a smiling face, a clean restaurant, and hot food. Okay. No matter what technology you have wrapped it, the technology just is an enhancement, I think, to an experience. But if you go away and you have the best technology and you're served cold food, mm, you're going to leave with a bad impression, you know? And so as much as we're talking about technology, it's still, I think, that customer experience, even whether you're at a retail store, if you have a bad experience with a sales associate or whatever, you still, the best technology in the world, really can't overcome, that human interaction, I think. And that's what in, an IT career, you just need to, especially the retail business, you have to understand who your customer is and know that you're there to make their job, not their job, but their life easier, a more, an easier, let's say, a UI experience, more fluid experience. You have them good offers, but in the end, you still need that associate that is there, that is friendly, and dealing with that consumer, at the end. I think that's very important. I think that's where the technology helps. It does help. It makes the sales associate more productive. But it's just my experience, whether in retail or the restaurant industry. When you're working with consumers, that you have to take in mind there. And so,
Sounds like you have to be very empathetic to be in those fields. Is that a trait that you would say, for other people wanting to get into a field of, let's say, retail or QSR, is that a trait that you would say, if you have that trait, then maybe that's a field that would be um, that would be good for you?
I think so. Yeah, you have to have the customer mind. Like the customer comes first. It comes back from my marketing background. The customer always comes first. And so you really have to understand that you're there to serve the customer, whatever that may be, whatever industry you are at. And I think even in the IT area, whether are working internally in an IT organization, serving other internal IT departments or other business departments, whether it's the accounts payable system, ERP team, you're working internally, you're there also to help them in that capacity to make their job easier or more efficient. And so it goes back, to just understanding the business. And when you understand, like, hey, you're there as a servant to help them, you know, whether it's internal customer or an external customer. And so I think having that empathy and that customer first mindset really is very, very important. Um, Despite that you're working in technology. Okay. Because in the end, technology is just the tool that the business is using. Whether in the business the BI space, it's measuring you're measuring success, you're measuring sales, you're measuring profits or whatever. But you're there to then work with the finance team, the marketing team, for example, right, or the operations team. And understanding. I think you need to also, I think, to be successful, understand the business. I think ultimately, whatever business you're in, I think that's my advice is really whatever company you're working at is really understand what they're doing. How are they making money? You're not just there as a programmer, but to really be successful, understand why are they asking for whatever that it is. Why are they asking for a new report? What is their problem they're trying to solve? You know what I mean? And that's really what I've tried to help focus in my career and in the teams that I've led is really to be a partner with those business teams to help, them get the best information and make it most efficient. Nowadays with AI and things like that, it's all about efficiencies and reducing manual steps. And I think understanding again, what are they doing? When I say they, the internal teams, how you can make it more efficient is really a key from taking a business mindset plus your technical abilities, to really make you stand out. I think that'll really help you stand out. If I have advice, to give, I think really will help you stand out in your career and help you advance. If you can help speak the language of business, whatever business you're in, you can understand and talk to them because a lot of, my experience has been a lot of people, let's say, if you're dealing with accountants or marketing people, they may not understand all the technology behind the scenes. And if you speak to them about the, I'll just call them technobabble things, they're going to gloss over and you're going to have it's kind of like speaking a different language. Okay. You're going to talk past each other all the time. And I think that's where if you want to get into management and you really need to understand and bridge the gap between the business language, what they're trying to accomplish and the technical language. Does that make sense, Marvin?
Dave, there's so much that I want to unpack in what you've said there. There's two specific things that I want to make sure that I absolutely do not forget. There's the first observation that I think that you made was, we were talking about empathy, and then you said, yes, empathy is good for external customers, but ultimately, particularly in the analytics space, you're going to have internal business users that may be the 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 ultimate end client, the internal client, if you will, for your data products or analytical products that you're producing. And what you said there was it's good to have empathy obviously for your external customers, but you also have to have empathy for your internal customers. And more specifically, you said that that empathy is by way of understanding them and understanding what their goals and needs are, so that whatever products you're developing would ultimately have them in mind. So, not focusing so much necessarily on how great the automation that you did is, but really thinking about it more, for example, by saying something like, instead of look at how many hours I saved in automating this process, maybe you could say, look at how the automation of this process ultimately helped my internal business customer achieve X goal. And I think that that's something that I think was very powerful that you mentioned, and a really good takeaway. The other thing that you mentioned was the industry expertise and knowing your business. And I think that one is a topic that I'd love to explore a little bit more, particularly because in the age of AI, a lot of the tasks and activity that we used to do before are being automated. I think as a result of that, there's a lot of fear in the market and many people jumping the gun and saying, oh, well, my job will no longer exist. Now, while there are many activities and functions that will no longer exist because they're highly repetitive in nature and can be programmed and automated, there's still a lot of activities, going back to your point, that cannot be automated. So, for example, even if you have AGI that can just intelligibly do something like a human, where you could say, go do this and then go do that, there's still, at least in the context of the business, there is that deep domain knowledge that cannot be programmed. And I think that that's the point that you made, right? Which is, know your business very well. And I think that if you know your business, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's something that will make you indispensable for any organization that you're in. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree, Marvin. I mean, if you really know your business, I think that that'll help you work with an IT team, okay? Or if you're in IT, really advance your skills, because AI is like another tool in your tool belt, okay? And I don't think people should be afraid of it. It's there to help you and make you much more productive, okay? But it still needs guardrails. It still needs a human to check the results and to verify that, you know, in the large language model world of hallucinating or coming back with the wrong results. It needs human interaction and to monitor what it's producing. But so it's really more of it is an augment. It's really an augmentation to your ability to make you much more productive. Whether it's you're a developer coding, okay, making you much more productive in the coding world, and automating repetitive things that have already been solved, helping you focus on what are the new things? How can I really help my customer? I don't need to, understand how to, move a flat file into a database. Okay. That's been solved. Okay. Those are things that have been solved. So put your mind on how can I make that analytics or something much more effective? And then you can use AI to then prototype things very quickly and things like that. So it really can help you speed up. And if you're on the business side of the house, I think that's where you can help work with your IT teams to say, I really have a process I'm spending a lot of time on. Can you help me with this? And then, a business analyst will come in and then look at all the manual work you're doing in Excel, for example, which is a lot. That happens a lot in business today, all over the place. And there's tons of opportunity there for them to be more effective, because then they can start solving problems, because these people that have been at companies 10, 20 years, they're a real asset to companies. And I think that's where they just need to have some help and some training, about what is AI, so they don't fear it, because there's a lot of pundits out there that don't understand really what AI is. And so we as technologists need to help them and help advise companies to, set up training programs and provide advice that's not there to just replace their job, but to make them much more effective, so they can do more knowledge work and not manual repetitive work. Does that make sense?
I think I absolutely love I love that, because it's a message of optimism versus fear about AI. And I think the more optimistic that we can be, the more creative that we can finally be about what will I do with my time in the organization. Because I think I agree with you 100%. that's what we need to be concerned with, which is now let's go be creative with how can I add more value to the external customer or my internal customers. I think I read some statistic, and I'm gonna have to fact check it and put it in the comments afterwards. But I read some statistic that said something like when the United States was first founded, over 90% of the people were farmers.
Oh yeah, I would believe it.
Well,
Yeah, sure. That's right. That was our
you
economy.
know, and that was our economy, and I'm sure that a lot of the people that were farmers at that time, they saw a tractor come in with the Industrial Revolution, and before you used to have 300 people that used to have to plow that field, and then one, 2, 3 tractors come in to do the job of those 300 people. I'm sure that they were fearful, at the time, but that Industrial Revolution also created a lot of jobs and new opportunities, which I think is your message, right? Which is let's be less fearful. Let's be more optimistic because in that optimism, we can free ourselves up to be more creative about how we can add more value. Dave, talking about value, how do you think, let's just say that now you want to give some advice to your 20-year-old self about how to accelerate your career. What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self if you had to do it over again?
It's funny because I have, some kids in college right now, okay? So they're right in that that area, and so I find myself, like, constantly pontificating on advice.
Do they listen?
I
Do
don't know if they
they
listen, yeah. I don't it's like a little bit, it's very funny, my son's going into finance or accounting, and, my daughter's boyfriend's going into engineering, and so I'm, like, giving them the same advice, like, literally tips about AI, and I think the biggest advice is, AI is gonna be the web of the 2000s, okay? The World Wide Web and just that explosion, and I the best thing you can do is to learn about what it is, so you don't get left behind. Because it's changing almost daily and weekly, Marvin, as you know, right? The industry is just constantly evolving. We're at this inflection point right now where, OpenAI is out there, Claude and all these other, massive engines, DeepSeek. But you need to be able to be fluent in understanding what are these things, what is it out there? And I think so spending some time educating yourself. Now, when I'm using like Coursera or Maven, those 2 things like right now. Google has a lot of free learning out there. You can go and learn about these things. And so there's tons of plus there's YouTube. I mean, everybody and their brother is out there on YouTube talking about this stuff. So those are just some free or almost free channels to educate yourself. Plus the traditional college courses you can take, obviously. But if you're out of college, that may not be an option. I would, heck, there's tons of stuff on YouTube. There's books. So those are ways I think to learn about it, understand what are these tools that you can be a part of the revolution and not have it affect you. You want to be part of what's happening. And I think that's where, as it's changing so much, what we said last year or 3 years ago, who was even thinking about large language models 3 years ago and what OpenAI has done? Right? I mean, it is totally turned the industry on its head, and I think that's just, gonna continue at a faster pace as we approach AGI. I think in the next 2 years, I think Sam Altman is saying, like, 2 years, he thinks he's gonna achieve it. But
Yeah, 1,000 days is what he's saying. We'll see.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think just educating yourself, and so now you can understand more about it, and not just this general term AI, that this buzzword that people throw around that it's not really, well, what is they really talking about? Machine learning, large language models, right? All these things, kind of understand what the terms mean. And then if you're more of an engineering mindset, that you obviously can dive in. But if you're a business mindset, then you can understand at a higher level. Oh, these are what these things. I can use things to maybe automate a chatbot. Like, first of all, what is a chatbot? For they ask the simple thing, you start at the simple and work your way down. So yes, my kids do listen to me, but, it's like, well, it doesn't.
I'll send him a link to this podcast in the section of advice, and we'll s
It's like, yeah, they're hearing me, but they're knee deep in their studies. My daughter's gonna be a nurse. And, what's funny is that, a real world example in nursing, my daughter is going down in Florida for a nursing school, is she is using ChatGPT extensively for questions. And so it's helping her quiz her on nursing questions to help pass her exams. And then she's also using Notebook LM. Okay. And, she's 20. Okay. And it's like, well, how did she find out about this stuff? Well, TikTok, YouTube. Okay. I mean, literally that's the generation now where they're getting their information from. And then she obviously comes, talks to me, and then she's expanded on that. And I've given her some guidance on these tools. But it's really, from an educational standpoint, it's really just amazing what AI can do. If you know how to prompt, you know how to prompt things. And I think that part of the thing is understanding that, you know, AI may not give you the right answer all the time. It's going to sometimes give you a random answer, and really you have to understand how to ask the question, which is prompting. It goes into the word prompting. It's really how to ask the LM to help you do what you want to do. In her case, she tells me some things, and I'm going, well, you need to use impersonation. Act as a nursing professor at a large college, and then ask your question. And so those are some guidance that I'm giving, very specific prompts to my son or my daughter, or her boyfriend, and it's really been very, very helpful to my daughter. I mean, it's really been amazing what she's been able to take, and really utilizing notes and summarizing notes with AI. And you see these things advertised too, like these, just like you can have AI listen to your meetings now and it transcribes your meetings, right? People are doing the same thing in classes. Okay. Which is a lot. Again, AI is a tool. It's using AI to go faster, where in the past you had to write it down by hand and things like that. Now you can become faster and work on the problem of understanding and learning faster, I think. It's just, from the educational perspective. That's my dad like you, Marvin.
Because, I wanna hit on what you mentioned with your daughter and how she was using it essentially to help her study, if you will. Um, one of the things that we're starting to see in the market is the rise of domain-specific LLMs. And so, for example, I'm sure that somebody out there is beginning to develop tutoring LLMs. And then you can just imagine you're going to have a tutor LLM for various different subjects. For example, on a very personal note, I leverage I don't know if you call it a psychologist or a relational LLM. It's called Pi. You could download it from the App Store. And this thing has been trained with all of the, let's say, classical um, books in psychology, therapy, those kinds of things. And I personally use it just to talk about, let's say, relational problems, or maybe there's something internally that I'm dealing with. And maybe I don't have time to, or maybe I don't see it as big of enough of a problem to go see a therapist at the time, which, by the way, I encourage everybody, if you have an issue, to talk to someone. But these tools, and the example that I'm giving right now, Pi is what I use, where, just little issues like, "Oh, listen, I'm feeling a little bit, hurt about the situation that I had with a friend." I can actually have a conversation back and forth. And so I think,
Yeah.
I like what you mentioned, because yes, I think ultimately the where the industry is going is domain specific LLMs, that will be able to assist in very specific tasks, such as helping a medical student prepare for an exam, or something of that nature. And I also want to touch on, Dave, one more other thing that you mentioned, which came before that, because I really love that imagery that it gave me. You said, you want to be part of the revolution. And you were talking about how we should begin educating ourselves through Coursera. I think it was Maven, and obviously you mentioned a lot of that stuff that's out there. I really like that, because one of the things that I love about that is that when we talk about revolution, there's always a sense of something that's brand new. Now, the reason I like that is because for the very first time, you have kids that are getting out of college, if we go back to the example of your children are going into college, that for the very first time, they could actually go and compete toe to toe with people like yourself and myself. Because as you mentioned, Nobody was talking about LLMs just 3 years ago. In other words, for the very first time, they will have they could easily just have just the same amount of exposure and experience and training to this new technology that you and I have. And we've been in the at least I've been in the industry for over 20 years, and so have you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just shared a path. And so for the very first time, they can go toe to toe with people like you and me. And to me, that's something very exciting for them.
Oh, I think it's a huge opportunity for young people that are coming out of college, that you don't need all this experience out because AI again is a tool. Now, honestly, what we would have is the context and the experience of how to use and implement solutions. Okay. And that's where our experience, is really, really important. Okay. So, but again, with learning the how things work, like you're saying, how AI works, the functions, 100%, they're jumping ahead because it's a new technology. And so it's really amazing and a huge opportunity, I think, for the younger generation, but also the older generation needs to not be afraid of it and need to embrace that. And I also think embracing the younger generation. Okay, I think that's you need to when you're a director, or I've been, and a manager, and really you need different points of view on your team. Okay, I think whether it's generational, racial, whatever you want to say, if you have different points of view, you can think about how to solve a problem in different ways, and they can bring a different perspective. And I think a lot of it, if you come back to the consumer, let's say go back to the fast food example, you have one generation like, okay, I got my news from newspapers. Okay, those are almost dead now, right? And then you have the TikTok generation or Snapchat, right? 100% different. But you need to have people that are from those different generations to provide that insight to your business. And I think, as leaders, we need to be open to those different points of view and learn from them. I think that really helps you as a leader when you're in that position. Is really embracing the new people that are coming in because they're bringing a different point of view and a different mindset, and they can help you. Hey, young people are going to eat fast food as well. Lots of it. So, you know what I mean? How do you reach those customers? How do you reach those consumers? And then using AI tools like we're talking about, how can we do it faster, more efficiently with those things? But anyway, the AI LLMs are just amazing. I just find them amazing now and just huge profit, not profit, but productivity enhancements. You know,
Well, that's a perfect bridge because you brought us back to retail and fast food. So talking about industries like retail and QSR, how do you think AI will begin to shape these industries, or how has it already shaped it now?
well, right now it's already they're already impacting it. So I think from a basically a fast food service industry right now, there's AI in the drive-throughs. Okay, so you're going through a drive-through, any kind of drive-through, and you may be chatting with like the Google Assistant or the Alexa. You're talking to a bot. Okay, you're talking to that, and so those have been out for the last really 2 years. I mean, we were one of the when I say we, CKE was helped one of the pioneers in that area, and we rolled it out to several hundred locations. And it wasn't perfect. Okay, the technology wasn't perfect, I think, but it was, there were some challenges in dialects as you go ahead the national chain. People in the South, people talk different than people in New York City, okay, or Boston. They just do. And so an AI needs to understand and be trained on dialects, okay? And that was one of the things we found out. And so it was very different to have that conversation when the AI is conversing with somebody. Hey, I want to have a Western bacon cheeseburger sandwich, and they're trying to then automatically upsell them. Well, what about a shake? And they're talking in different dialects. That was one of the things we found, and the model had to constantly be trained on that. So that's getting better and better. Okay, so that is certain restaurants right now are using it. I think is providing help, even like if it's a 24-hour restaurant, things like that. When there's staffing challenges, they're using it. They're not replacing everybody in the store. Okay, I don't know if you get that message. It's really a tool to help to help the staff that they have during times when there's staff shortages. Sometimes people don't show up to work, but that AI tool is always there And so they're using it, at certain locations where it makes sense for now. And I know, also, I think, they're like I know Tracker, I've read about what they're doing with AI, looking at using camera technology, and their employees that are in the store wear this orange was red vest. And so they've trained using AI to recognize that red vest and where it is in the store. And they can see where customers, if they're backing up at a register, then they'll have the AI system send a message to their little walkie-talkie, like, "Hey, you need to come up to the register. There's so many people in line," for example. Or in the front of the store, like in a Tractor store, outside the store, they have their lawnmowers out there and their other stuff that, and they may not see customers that are out there looking around that need help and need assistance. These systems are recognizing it with AI and then sending a message to the employee so they could come out with there within a couple minutes and say, "Hey, can I help you, customer?" And so that's some stuff that's going on right now, in the industry that I'm aware of, that it's really, helping again, making the consumer experience, better. Okay.
So Dave, let's talk about that human component of it, of AI. From a change management perspective, how can organizations begin to promote or begin to accelerate the adoption of AI within the organization?
Well, I think it comes down to having an, I don't know if you call it an AI first strategy, but it needs to start leadership level and work its way down. There's different ways that companies have approached this, but I think to be successful, basically having the executives say, "We're going to embrace AI to help our company become more efficient and help our customers," and et cetera, et cetera. And then provide training and, like, what is it, to all of the staff so that they understand and they can start talking about a common language. Because there's a lot of technology terms that are thrown out that not everybody understands. Like, what does LLM mean? I don't
Mhm.
know. You know what I mean? Not everybody understands what that is. I mean, my wife's a doctor, okay? Smart person, and I'm always explaining to her about all these things that are out there. And if you have that perspective, you don't assume that everybody understands just the terminology you're using. So I think it come back to education, and then, because then you can start, even those people that aren't technologists can go, "Oh, maybe I could do, like, I have an idea. I am doing this today." And they can come to the IT department, for example, like, "I have an idea." And those are the things that are really meaningful that can provide impact because they know how they're doing their job every day. And so there's a lot of that knowledge. If they knew that there's opportunities like, "Oh, maybe we could use AI. I'm going to ask somebody." You know what I mean? Having that, not being afraid of it, but encouraging it and going, "Oh, how can I use it to help me?" Having that mentality at a company, comes through training, and being open about it and how it's helping the company become more efficient, and then investing in training within the organization, so people are not afraid that I'm just going to lose my job. I'm going to be outplaced, for example. And I think that's where there's just a lot of opportunity. I mean, I see there's, like I said, my wife, she's a doctor, and I see there's massive opportunity in the medical industry for AI. When it comes to, billing and all the stuff that you have to do, there's going to be massive opportunity in the next, I think, 5 years there in that industry.
I think that's a really good segue into the next question that I had, which is in some industries, for example, continuous learning is a requirement. For example, the easiest one that everybody can relate to is a CPA because everybody gets their taxes done by a CPA. Hopefully, they're not getting their taxes done by someone who's not a CPA. Should just But you probably want someone who's certified, and these individuals, just like your wife, have required continuous learning. Now, they have required continuous learning, and now essentially we're asking those individuals to take on additional learning for future, right? And the question is how do you balance that? What are the leadership strategies that you would recommend to organizations and to leaders to balance the need of training for the future versus the existing operational needs today?
I think you need to give your employees some dedicated time to do this. I think when you look at, like, your annual review period, and then you go and you plan your next year, for example, what I've done in the past is say, "I'm going to, give you 40 hours to do learning." during the year. Okay. Whether that's taking a couple days at a time or 2 hours a week. Okay. Whatever you want to do. I think that's important because you can put that on your goals for the year when you have that opportunity with your boss. Because a lot of times they're like, "Oh, what are your goals for the year?" They're all, typically they're asking you to put that in there. You have the opportunity to say, "Well, I want to take these classes," or "I want to learn about this," and so then you can negotiate with your boss to say, "I need to have some time," and then if they're really serious, they'll allow you to have some time on the job to help do that. And they may fund it or allow you to have some time if you do it on your own, or a combination of that. I think that's what's going to be important is having that culture to learn within, if you're a regular full-time employee.
That's something I'm very passionate about. I think what many organizations don't realize is that if we're talking about software, I think the statistic is something like organizations either implement a new software or a new process to existing, processes or softwares once a year. So what that means is if you're not continuously learning, you're literally falling behind on the new process or the new technology that you just implemented. Many organizations we see in our world of consultancy do purchase, let's say, some training package that goes along with whatever new software or maybe new process that they've implemented, but many don't continue it. And I think that that's where I love the point that you made because I think that that's where organizations are falling short. And sometimes you have to use an extreme example that hits maybe a nerve in order to make a point. And I think the examples that I go back to is imagine, in your case, Dave, or mine, I have a 13-year-old daughter. And so I think for me, when she gets old enough, I think self-defense training is going to be something incredibly important that will be required for her to do ongoing training. Don't get me wrong. I think that the best advice is always to teach them how to be smart enough to avoid difficult situations and to run far away from it, but you're always gonna have to have that, and the example that I like to give that is, okay, well, if your daughter or your son or your loved one or significant other was in a situation where they were required to have to defend themselves, would you want them to have continuous self-defense training, or do you want them to kinda wing it, at that time? And the same example could be done for, um CPR training, right? Would you
Oh,
want someone that did ongoing training for CPR to save your loved one that maybe was choking on something? Or do you want someone that maybe just did it the one time?
yeah.
Um, and I think I really resonate with the point that you just made because I think that that's one area that, guess what? It's something that they could do right now to solve a very, very big problem.
Well, I was just gonna say that when an employer really offers training to their employee, it really builds a lot of trust with that employee. Like they're investing in me as a person. And I think that really resonates because I think in the software field, they're very naturally hungry to always, a lot of mostly to learn new things. And so it's always comes to sometimes a battle for that training budget. Okay. But it really means a lot to the developer community for sure. I know that for a fact that they're investing in you. The company's investing in you. That really builds that relationship that's a two-way partnership between the employee and the employer.
And I know you mentioned Maven, we talked about YouTube, I think that there was one more that you had mentioned. Are there any other
Yeah,
recommend course?
yeah, Coursera. I mean, and you also can find those are just readily available. Um, but if you're looking for training, I mean, you always could open up ChatGPT and say, "Hey, I need some help. Please give me some ideas on training modules that I can do in this area." And guess what? You're going to get some answers. Okay, so you can use AI again to help you. Oh, learn about AI. Okay, and some people may not even understand that, but you can use these AI tools to help teach you where to go to learn more about how to use them, which is amazing. Like you couldn't do that in the past. In the past, you would just go you had to pick up a book. You had to take a course. But now, literally, you could download this. Whether it's Claude, Gemini, and Google or whatever, you can go to them and go, I need you, type in a prompt that says, I need you to help. I want to learn about this system. How can I use this tool better? And you'll ask you questions. and it'll teach you. I mean, these things are like a teacher. And so they're massive tools that are right there at your fingertips. And so most people don't understand that I can just ask these kind of general questions. And now they're out there, they're linking to either websites, okay? Now they're linking to modern websites, right? I shouldn't say modern, but they're linking to websites. They're not just giving a response that's off of old data. They're giving real responses. Um, Even, yesterday, for example, my daughter and I are having a conversation of where, she wants to maybe be a nurse practitioner. So when she graduates, where are some sites in Florida that offer online only nurse practitioner programs? Okay. And so we went on to ChatGPT. We put that parameter in there, limited to Florida. Say I want nurse practitioner school, et cetera, coming out of USF, and it came through and it gave me a list. And then I asked it to rank these, and then it gave the sources. So where are these sources from? Then it will list where it gets this information, and so it's a great starting point to then focus in on. Oh, now I can then jump in maybe to Google or something. So I think that's where they can be extremely helpful to help your thinking through where do I even start versus going to the internet and maybe doing a random search. I mean, that's where they really provide a lot of help. Um, so that's just a real world example from yesterday.
Yeah. Dave, it seems like you've got a lot of exposure with training that may be externally available to the public in AI specifically. I'm wondering how exhaustive is that training in AI? So, for example, do they cover things like ethical considerations and maybe topics like responsible AI?
Yeah, they do. I recently myself took a course on Coursera that was taught from a professor at Vanderbilt University. So Vanderbilt is a university, private university here in Nashville, very prestigious university. And one of their professors in computer science has a significant amount of training on large language models, and one of them is specifically about ethical considerations of how to use models and what you should ways to use them and ways not to use them. Okay, for example, so to make guardrails that need to be put in place for and for example, I'll give an example of this. You wouldn't want to go in and ask a AI like, here are my symptoms, like from a doctor perspective. Let's say, hey, I have these symptoms of blah 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 blah. Can you tell me what's wrong with me? Okay, you wouldn't want to
I
go
love
and
that. I love that that's the way that I've been diagnosing myself with Google all the time. I mean, that's probably like I have cancer, but
now, yes, they may get it they may be exactly right, but now they're actually saying in there, the model will say, "I am not a doctor." Okay, if I go, "Number 1, I'm not a doctor." Okay, so I think however, it can provide a bunch of information, so when you have a conversation with a physician, you can say, "Oh, by the way, what about these things that I heard, from these AI engines? Oh, by the way," and so you can have a more intelligent conversation about your symptoms with a physician, but ultimately, a human being needs to make the final decision, okay? And even in, right now, in terms of, radiology, for example, AI is being extremely successful, I think, in detecting breast cancer. There's some new products coming out, but it doesn't just say, "Hey, oh, you have cancer," by looking at a scan. It suggests to the doctor, "Here is a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 20 that are some areas I think you need to look at." And that's happening right now. So it's allowing that to be do a scan and then turn around that information immediately to the radiologist to then reinforce and go, "Yes." Or maybe they would point out something, but a human being will look at that and go, "Yes," and to make the final decision, but it's augmenting it and speeding up the whole process. Okay, for example. So it's making doctors much more efficient in that and reducing, I think it'll reduce error rates in that specific instance. I was reading some articles about that. But yeah, there's a lot of training out there for ethical considerations and also leadership. How do you embrace that? And, like I said, I took some courses through Vanderbilt, they did a very, very good job walking me through examples and what you should do and not do. And um, so it's a lot of stuff out there. So it's really, really been great that you know, um, you can find this stuff relatively inexpensively. Okay. Really, really inexpensively. You can learn this stuff.
And based off of your training and your experience, one of the very specific takeaways for introducing ethics into AI solutions is introduce the human component, so that there's one step before, let's say, the recommendation or the action that you take from the AI solution goes out, that there's one human step that will be that additional ethical um, barrier, if you will, that applies ethics to whatever recommendation is coming out. What
Yeah.
about any frameworks?
What about, excuse me?
What about some frameworks? Are there any ethical frameworks that you think companies should be following?
If you're asking for an official name of a framework, I don't think I can tell you that when it comes to mind. Um, it's been basically knowing that you need to make sure you have a human being in your decision-making process, okay? Or your decision-making process, that you're not just wholeheartedly believing everything, because some things, these models are changing all the time, and they produce a lot of randomness, and they may, in fact, give you a wrong answer. And so understanding that everything they say may not be right is the first thing you need to know as a person. Like, they can give you answers that are totally wrong, and that may be based on the fact that you're not providing them enough information to guide them in the right area. And so that's where the human being is important. And I think is as we approach the AGI, artificial general intelligence, they're becoming better and better and better, and which is reducing these hallucinations by a large degree. So I think you just have to have a human being involved in these things. And I think also when it comes to legal contracts and things like that, it's the same thing applies. I've read articles where attorneys have even gotten in trouble from using AI to generate contracts and not read them through, and then
Mhm.
and made up citations of cases that never existed. Okay. Like, that happened. Okay, so
Yeah.
you need to not trust you need to, verify. And I think I just got done with a class about you need to verify the results of what they're saying. If you're making a business decision or a life-altering decision, you need to check what it's saying. Okay. And that's where the human component comes in. And just understanding that as an everyday user, will be a huge, advice to yourself, but also as a business perspective, putting those checks in place that there's a process in a company where it's reviewing the recommendations or reviewing the contracts that it's creating or looking at, for example, um, is what needs.
And I think that's a really good distinction between consumer AI versus business AI. And here's what I mean by that. What many people don't realize is that LLMs are probabilistic in nature. In other words, they were developed for creativity and coherence. The response is meant to be different, even with similar inputs for various reasons.
Right.
What many businesses need are solutions that are deterministic in nature. In other words, we want you to tell us, for example, whether or not this analog gauge has reached its limit or not. Guess what? We always want the answer to be the same if the gauge has gone overboard, yes or no.
Right.
And so I think that that's also another very key point for many organizations to remember is the LLMs are probabilistic. And so what you really need for the enterprise, if you're going to implement that, is some form of architecture, preferably RAG, let's say, or maybe an agentic architecture that includes some very fixed contextual data. And also that includes evaluation and feedback loops in order to ensure the response that it's giving, and it checks its own response to determine whether or not it's deterministic or not. Because for us to be able to automate processes, businesses need to have a very definitive answer for some specific questions.
No, totally agree. Totally agree.
So, Dave, as we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on actionable next steps. So, for leaders who want to ensure that they're ready for AI, what are the top three things that they should be focusing on today?
I think just continuous education. I mean, like I said, go out there and take some courses I was on Coursera. I did one on Maven as well recently in the last 2 months. So sign up for some courses on AI, understanding what it is at a high level. Number two, ethical considerations. There's courses out there right now to talk about that. So start at the high level, okay, before you get into the technical stuff, to just understand the basics, what it is, what it can do, what to be cautious of. That is number one. And then if you're a company, then I think instituting those policies in your company to embrace AI across the organization, communicate about it, be open about how it can help your organization, and stand that up as a normal conversational piece within the organization. And so employees are not afraid of it, and that embraces the company. And so you bring the employees along. So then, if you're a young person again, it's all about jumping in and doing some training and being part of it, but understanding the business side of it. Okay. You may understand technically what it is, but understand the business that you're going to be jumping into, to how take this technology and apply it to your business. And so that's the other side that they would have to learn, if you're coming out of college.
Those are my
Dave,
tips.
Marvin.
that's fantastic. And I really hope that our listeners will appreciate and take a lot from this conversation. I mean, definitely, we appreciate you making the time. It goes back to your point about your passion for learning. This is definitely a podcast where listeners can learn something for it for free. And so we really appreciate your time. I appreciate it, and I hope the listeners appreciate your time. So thanks again, Dave. And to all of our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to Data Leaders Unscripted for more conversations like this. We'll continue to explore how data and AI and analytics are shaping the future. Until next time, Marvin Mayorga, stay curious and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Thanks, Marvin. Been great.
Thanks, Dave.